Ohio State may have won the 2025 national championship, but in this video, I'm looking towards the 2026 national championship. I'm going to talk about the 10 most realistic teams that could actually win the 2026 national championship for college football, and I'm going to rank them from 1 to 10. And obviously, the college football season will start in 2025, but it actually ends in 2026, which is when the national championship is played. So let's talk about those 10 teams that I think could win the 2026 national championship. Now let's start at number 10. At number 10, I do have Miami. Look, I really didn't know who else to put here. I think there's realistically 9 teams that could win the national championship if something goes their way. But Miami is a team that is a big dark horse to me. I don't see them really winning the national championship or coming close. But I had to make a top 10 ranking, and I have Miami at number 10 because they do have some very good talent. I do think Carson Beck is going to be a step down from Cam Ward, but I do think Carson Beck's also an experienced quarterback, and he's a decent quarterback. And maybe Miami's defense will take this big step forward, especially in the secondary that nobody expects. If they can do that, then maybe they will be in the conversation. But yeah, they lose some pieces. They lose their running back, Damian Martinez. They lost their top receiver, Xavier Restrepo. They lost Cam Ward as well. But like I said, this team has very good talent, and I do have them at number 10. I didn't know who else to put here. Right ahead of Miami, I have Clemson at number 9. I also think this is very unlikely. Dabo Swinney has passed his years of winning national championships, but maybe he can get back to those years. This Clemson team looks very good heading into next year. They return their top 3 wide receivers. They return Kay Klubnik at quarterback, a very experienced quarterback and a guy that I'm very high on. The defense is usually good. They've been consistently good. And one thing that really surprises me is that Dabo Swinney is actually using the portal. Maybe he will get this team back on the right track. And I do think Clemson is a dark horse next year. And they have a very, very slight chance to win the national championship. I honestly don't know if they have the trench play to do that. But they do have a very talented team. And Dabo Swinney is a proven head coach. I think they're steps ahead of Miami. I like them a lot more than Miami. And I do expect them to win the ACC. And I have the Clemson Tigers at number 9. They have some very good young talent returning next season. Look, I know Alabama had a very underwhelming 2024 season, especially nearing the end of the season. They couldn't do anything on offense. But I still have this Bama team in my top 10. I can't leave them out, and I have them at number 8. They are one of the most talented teams in the nation. And a lot of people still have faith in Kalen DeBoer, including me. I still think he's a very good head coach. He just needs to adapt at Bama. Kalen DeBoer led a Washington team with 4 stars to a national championship game. So if he can adapt to this Alabama team and get them playing their best football, they will be dangerous. Another thing that also is a positive is that they are bringing over Ryan Grubb, the former Washington offensive coordinator when Kalen DeBoer was there. And Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer will be working together once again, but this time at Alabama, and that could be dangerous and elevate that offense. 2024 was only year 1 for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, so do not count out this team yet. Do not count out Kalen DeBoer yet. They have multiple options to go to at quarterback. They have the 5-star true freshman quarterback in Keelan Russell. Or they can go with a guy that I think would succeed in a Kalen DeBoer offense. Those guys are Austin Mack or the other quarterback, Ty Simpson. I think they're both very good pocket passers. Look, there's no surprise that this Alabama team has the roster to build off of. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they made their way back to the playoffs. And they are a dark horse to win the national championship in my eyes. I have them at number 8. Another dark horse national title contender is LSU. I have them at number 7. Brian Kelly has been to the big stages before. He's had a lot of experience as a head coach. And some people are starting to count him out. Maybe he steps up and this LSU team has their best season yet. I really think next year is a very important year for LSU. They need to make the playoffs next year at least. This is a team that has the trajectory of that defense heading uphill. They were terrible on defense in 2023, let's not forget. But this is a defense that Brian Kelly is trying to rebuild, and Blake Baker is a very good defensive coordinator. They have the number 1 transfer portal class in America. They'll have one of the best defensive players back in the country in Harold Perkins Jr. You pair him with the transfer from Florida State off of the edge. Those are going to be 2 very dangerous edge rushers for them. Look, I could see LSU missing the playoffs once again and struggling again. But I also think the ceiling of this team is a national championship. They are building up their talent. They have had multiple top 10 recruiting classes with Brian Kelly. They will be returning Garrett Nussmeier for another season after he passed for 4,000 yards last season. If he can cut back on turnovers and be more consistent, he will be very dangerous as a quarterback and a Heisman Trophy contender. Like I said, they have the number one transfer portal class. They brought in two very good receivers out of the portal in Barian Brown and Nick Anderson. Honestly, I think this team has everything they need to be a national title contender. It just depends on if it's truly going to pay off. But regardless, I think the ceiling of this team is very high. I have them at number 7. Now, as we move into my top 6, I think these are the 6 legit national title contenders for next year. None of these teams winning the Natty would surprise me. And at number 6, I have Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman has proven that he is one of the best head coaches in college football. In just a couple of years, he has really built this Notre Dame team up. They will have to replace some holes on defense, and they lost their leader at quarterback and Riley Leonard and multiple leaders on defense. But they still have one of the strongest offensive lines once again, and probably the best returning running back in the country in Jeremiah Love. If they can build off of that rushing game, they're going to be very hard to stop again. Plus, it wouldn't surprise me if this offense took a step forward and pass and play. I think they could get more contributors in the passing game, more specifically at wide receiver, I should say. They've added some pieces out of the transfer portal at wide receiver, and I think they got some quality wide receivers, and they should have a very good defense again. I have this Notre Dame team at number 6. I trust Marcus Freeman. At number 5, I have the Georgia Bulldogs. I can't leave Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs out of my top 5. They are way too talented, and Kirby Smart has already won 2 national championships. He is chasing the 3rd. Maybe next year could be that year. They have a bit of a question mark at quarterback. They will have to replace Carson Beck, and Gunnar Stockton should be that guy. I do think he will be a solid dual threat quarterback, but I don't really know what to think about him. I don't think we've seen enough from him to know if he's going to be a very good quarterback for Georgia. Kirby Smart also really needs to work on the running game. They did not have a very good run game in 2024. It was definitely disappointing. The trenches was not as good as they usually are. There's some obvious holes on this team that needs to be worked on, but I trust Kirby Smart and they are very talented. If this team takes that big step forward offensively, it's going to be due to a better Russian attack, and I think more importantly due to productivity at wide receiver, with guys like Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas coming in. It's been a couple of years since Georgia has had that standout wide receiver. They had Brock Bowers, but they haven't had that standout wide receiver. Now last year it really held them back. They did not have great wide receivers. But I believe Zachariah Branch could be one of the breakout players next season and possibly a top 3, top 2 wide receiver in the country next season. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith will probably be number 1. But I'm really high on Zachariah Branch. He can do a little bit of everything. He's very explosive, and I think he has massive breakout potential for Georgia. I think he will work well with that Mike Bobo offensive system. I like this Georgia team. I do have some questions with them, so I do only have them at number 5. I think it's only a matter of time until Dan Lanning wins a natty at Oregon. Oregon has never won a national championship in football. But I do have this team at number 4. They are going to be in the conversation every year. I don't really think it's going to be next year that they win the natty, but I do think it is going to come with time. Next year concerns me a bit as an Oregon fan. I am an Oregon fan myself. Next year does concern me a bit because they are losing a bunch of talent and a bunch of seniors on defense. They have to replace multiple offensive linemen, multiple wide receivers. They have to replace Dylan Gabriel at quarterback. I still have great expectations for this team. Dante Moore is a former 5-star. They've had to rely on the transfer portal the last couple of years to pick up quarterbacks, so it's going to be a different story with Dante Moore. Dan Lanning is doing his thing in the portal once again. They picked up big-time defensive players like Bear Alexander and the safety from Purdue. They have also been rising in the recruiting. They have back-to-back top 5 recruiting classes. I'm very high on this Oregon team, even if they're losing a lot of pieces. I still think they will be in the conversation. They return Evan Stewart at wide receiver. He should be a big-time player for them. But also watch out for young guys like Jeremiah McClendon. I could see him taking a big step forward. And even the true freshman wide receiver, Zachariah Moore, I could see him having a big year, kind of like Jeremiah Smith last year. So Oregon has the talent, but they will need a bunch of young pieces to step up, and they will have to rely on transfer portal playmakers. But I trust Dan Lanning. I can't leave this team out of my top 5. I have them at number 4. It wouldn't surprise me if they won a national championship, but I don't think it will be next year. Now, as we get to my top three, I think all three of these teams could win a national championship. They are my three favorites. I think one of them are for sure going to win a natty next year. These are teams that I don't have too many questions for heading into next year. They look elite on both sides of the ball. And at number three, I have Ohio State. I guess you could say they have questions because they have to replace a lot on defense and replace both coordinators. But this is a team that is coming off a national championship victory, and I expect them to build off of that. I think Julian Sain will be just fine at quarterback, maybe even better than Will Howard. He is a former 5-star. It might take him time to get set in that offense. But the thing that makes me confident in this Ohio State team is the fact that they returned the two best players in college football in Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. They have two very great leaders on defense. I expect them to be very good once again. They still have plenty of talent on the defensive side of the ball. And they added guys like CJ Donaldson and Max Clare at tight end, two guys that I think will very much contribute to that offense. So yeah, I'm still very high on Ohio State. I have them at number 3. And at number 2, I have Penn State. I think if there's a year this team finally wins a national championship and James Franklin proves everybody wrong, it's going to be next season. I think it's very likely that Penn State finally wins a game against a top 5 team. I could see them getting over the hump and beating Ohio State or Oregon next year, maybe both of them. But this is a team that I could really see making the national championship game with who they have back. Penn State has a similar story to Michigan and Ohio State of the previous years. They have head coaches that everybody made fun of and doubted. But this is a team that returns a bunch of veterans. They return all 5 starting offensive linemen, their top 2 running backs, and a veteran quarterback in Drew Aller. They have a year 2 offensive coordinator in Andy Kotelnicki, who I think is one of the best OCs in the country. They also added one of the best defensive coordinators in the country from Ohio State and Jim Knowles, and they always have a good defense even if they're losing some pieces. They do lose Abdul Carter, but they also return a lot on defense. I'm very high on this Penn State team. I think they have the roster to go all the way next season. They aren't a super talented team, but they have a very similar story to Michigan. They fought and fought and fought, and they have a veteran team returning for next year. And I think next year could be the year that James Franklin proves everybody wrong and proves why he is a good football coach. I like this Penn State team. I like what they have coming back. I like everything about this Penn State team. I have them at number 2. And I think the absolute same thing could be said about Texas. I have them at number 1. Not only do they have that culture builder and a great head coach in Steve Sarkisian, but they absolutely have the talent to do it. And they return leaders on defense at every level. This is going to be one of the best defenses in the country. I would actually predict that they will have the best defense in the country next season. But not only that, they have some young wide receivers coming up like Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore Jr. And what about CJ Baxter returning, a guy that a lot of people are high on? He will be returning from injury, and I think he could be a very good running back and help elevate that Texas rushing game. And of course, Arch Manning at quarterback. I do think he's a bit overhyped. I don't think he's going to be super elite for them, but I think he's going to be just good enough. I don't think they need this elite quarterback to win a natty. I think this Texas team has everything. They have the culture, and they definitely have the talent, and they have the head coach in Steve Sarkisian, who has been working his tail off. And it's hard for me to believe that this team will fall short again. The last 2 years, they went to the semifinals. So I think it's safe to say that they get over that hump and win the national championship next year. They are my favorite. Right now, I am picking them to win the 2026 national championship. They have a very similar story to Michigan. Michigan went to the semifinals back-to-back years, and they won the national championship the 3rd year. And I'm predicting Texas to do the same thing. I think they have everything that they need, and I have them at number 1. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You guys leave your prediction for who you think will win the national championship next year down in the comments below. But let me remind you guys to like the video and also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And if you guys love college football, then you'll love this channel because we upload a ton of college football content and we basically cover everything on this channel. So definitely consider subscribing and also consider checking out my socials down in the description below. But that is going to do it, guys, and peace out.